to session, I guess. We have a quorum, and we've called to order, so we're on to item 3 on the agenda, approval of agenda. Does anybody have any additions or changes that they'd like to make to the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes. Okay, the approval of the next item is approval of the prior board meeting minutes. Does anybody have any changes that they would like to see in the July 16th meeting minutes?
I move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the July 16th meeting minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, that passes. Mark. Okay, now on the agenda, we have a public comment period. It's 15 minutes for items that aren't on the agenda. I see a lot of people here, and I know there's some interest in people speaking, so we have 15 minutes. Who all is interested in speaking? Two people?
We've got a few, depending on the time.
How many people are interested? How many people are interested in speaking? Can I just see a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I get that right? There's 6. So 15 divided by 6, 2.5 minutes each. So let's get started.
My name is Tracy McKee, and I live at 2768 Helen Street. I'm representing this group of people here that are my friends and family. It feels very much like this committee is acting and biased against slip and launch boaters on behalf of a group of lakeshore property owners, some of whom have offered private funds to monitor and restrict public use. This no longer feels like you are representing a public body of water, but attempting to make this an exclusive, semi-private amenity. They do not own the lake and should not be allowed to dictate what boaters can do based on their personal preferences. There has been no call to sit down and come to agreeable solutions. It has been about limiting access of this public beach. It feels as though all slip and launch boaters are being targeted as offenders of the lake. Maximum pressure, maximum inconvenience will push them onto different lakes, was a quote from the last meeting. That, to me and to many others, feels like a threat to rid this lake of public boaters. And that we are slowly but aggressively being pushed out to the middle of the lake, which any avid boater knows would make this dangerous boating for everybody. White Bear Lake has been highlighted in Minnesota Monthly as the best Minnesota town, and is getting a lot of positive press, and everyone wants to enjoy it. We understand that roughly 10 years ago, Memorial Beach was deserted. 5 years ago, it was active but quiet. But the water came up fast, and it appears that the homeowners in this committee was grossly underprepared for this scenario. We park our boat outside the swim ropes of Memorial Beach. We and many others do this so our kids can safely access and utilize the swim and beach area. Now our access is restricted to this public amenity and creates a swimming hazard for children and adults alike. The water is deep beyond the buoys. Adults of average height cannot easily touch. It creates a bottleneck of anchored boats that are constantly rocking and spinning on their anchors. You have increased the likelihood of boat damage, prop accidents, and drowning. In shallower water, it was easier for a person to stand in the water and position their boat safely, quickly move about to help other boaters and children. And this is no longer possible. Children are now expected to swim through this hazard to access the swim area. Many pontoons, including myself, have sea legs to safely rise us out of the water and create a stationary situation so our boat is no longer a hazard. And yes, we tie up with our friends. We do not stand in the water to drink our beer.
And I'm sorry, I have to cut you off there so that we can get everybody into the 15
I
minutes.
would like to finish.
Okay, so we have 2 people that have waved. Anybody else that wants? You want to waive yours as well? So now we're down to 3 people? Okay, so 5 minutes.
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you, yep.
We do not stand in the water so we can drink our beer, prevent access for police, but to create a safe and stable parking situation for all the boats and swimmers. We do this so our kids, ranging in age from 6 months to 16, can exit boats safely and access the swim area. If you have ever carried a child up a boat ladder or lifted them up to another adult, you know that it is hard, even in waist-deep water. Now try doing it when you can't even touch the bottom and your boat is constantly moving. It quickly gets dangerous. As parents, it is plain common sense that we would want to stand in the water up to here and safely support our children while they swim. because even with life jackets, small children should not be left to swim unattended. And as adults, we do actually enjoy getting in the water to cool off too, and we have the right to do so safely. But now you feel the safest solution is to have us anchor in deep water and let everyone fend for themselves, all to appease a few homeowners that choose to live off a public beach. Fearmongers have suggested that we are creating a health hazard like Lake Minnetonka, and I can assure you that no one in our large group, including the pirates, are using anyone's beachfront or dock as a public bathroom. We actually used to have quick access to the public bathrooms or to let our dogs out, but that too has been restricted. So if you are worried about health issues, you have just made those worse, not better. We are not criminals, bad actors, spoiled rich kids, hard partiers, or pirates. We are parents, friends, hardworking members of the community who just want to get on the lake and enjoy it, just like the lakeshore property owners. I would encourage you to get out into the water and talk to the public that you serve. Many of us are not transients. My family has boated on this lake for 18 years, exclusively for the last 6, and plan to do so for many more. Most of us slip our boats at ice out and have been known to pull from the lake as late as November. We truly enjoy lake life and make the most out of any day, literally rain or shine. We have met many wonderful people, created lifelong friendships, and a strong support system lasting far beyond our lake days. There's a strong network that has been growing on this lake for decades. Family and friend connections and links between many of the boating groups, and we are a community that speaks very openly. The one group that has refused to speak openly and communicate is the homeowners. We have been verbally abused from shorelines and docks of private homes and condos and the Tallies dock on numerous occasions. Some are now being slandered in newspapers. This has been no attempt to communicate in a civilized manner. Even with our children on board, we have been sworn at, harassed, and videotaped, as was encouraged at your last meeting. All for being parked or anchored and quietly enjoying our day. If you wanted to manage noise, create a noise ordinance. Give us something tangible and measurable to work with. If homeowners want to manage their docks, they should do so within the limits of their association or personal capabilities with cameras or signs. But they and you should not be allowed to partner up and work against boaters on public waters. It will only continue to create a contentious relationship between these two groups and make lake life less enjoyable for everyone. Until the buoys appeared, we have had a lot of pleasant encounters with the Water Patrol. We are fully confident that they knew what was going on and when necessary took proper action. We are assured we are well within our rights to do what we have been doing. We do not avoid police with the use of scanners, radios, and lookouts. That's ridiculous. We are not criminals looking to skirt the law, but you have now increased the workload of the Water Patrol and are beginning to create a contentious relationship between them and boaters. The lake is about much more than what a homeowner would like to see. Think about the business owners that operate restaurants and slips. They will not survive on the homeowners alone. They depend on boats just like us to eat, slip, and gas up. And if you truly intend to push us onto other lakes, the negative impact will be reached far beyond the boaters. Please think beyond your property lines and your personal preferences and consider everyone that has a right to use this lake and make lasting memories of summer days. So far, what my kids remember most is being yelled at and videotaped by random strangers. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Next. Next.
How many more minutes do we have?
I let you go long, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it looks to me like we've used 7 of our 15 minutes.
I'll speak. I don't know these guys very well.
Yeah, just come up and...
Ken Campbell.
Yep, give us your name and your address, and then fire it up.
1760 Myrtle Street, Maplewood, Minnesota. I slip at Tallies. So we also use the lake. We're probably the closest ones to shores all the time. I like to get in and out of the water. I have no problem. I don't understand what's even going on. It's kind of, I see them getting videotaped. I see them getting yelled at. I don't understand it. So I'm trying to figure out what the problem is. What is the deal? I don't understand. I got kicked out last week. The police came, or the sheriff came and said, you're too close to the shore. Got kicked out. I was in the normal spot I always am. It's been years and years that I've been in the same spot, and now I'm getting kicked out. I don't understand. So that's all I can say.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Tom Truller, recently retired to Vadnais Heights, White Bear Lake graduate, 25 years in White Bear Lake, and I had a business downtown for 5 years.
And can you give us your address, please?
4157 Centerville Road,
Thank you.
Vadnais Heights. I watched the video from last month's meeting, and I was a little appalled when references were made to my friend Kevin here as a pirate and a bad guy, and I couldn't not come here tonight. I know this guy for the last couple of years, and this is one of the hardest working community guys you could ever want to be with and associate with. As many people in this room probably remember your days of having some fun after hard work. That's all this guy is trying to do. He's a businessman. He spends money in this town. Every one of these restaurants, all these people here go to these restaurants in town. When they pull their boat out of the water, they take it over and get it filled up with 100 gallons of gas. So they use this town, not Minneapolis, not St. Paul, and they're not trying to create Minnetonka out of this lake. This lake could be the envy of Minnetonka and those people out there, if you read any of their articles. But I think it takes the concerns that people have shown at the last meeting and the concerns that these people have, maybe they can get together and come to some understanding about what bothers the others and see if they can come to some, good resolutions. All the fighting, you guys have been through this stuff with having no water. You got water. So you know what all the fighting's about, and I say that the groups should get together. They're not breaking the law. If they were, they would have tickets. That's the first thing I asked. So if they're not breaking the law or the ordinances, but they are offending some people, why don't we just sit down as adults, figure out what that is, and see if they can come to some resolutions. I don't know that if that's you guys' responsibility. I think they have some responsibility. I think both sides do, to do that. So I just wanted to throw 2 cents in on behalf of Kevin, because he's not what was depicted in the last time I watched your video from the last meeting, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I would go real quick.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead. So I had a Matt McKee, 620 Woodland Drive, Matamidi, Minnesota. I had a very elaborate 2 or 3 page PowerPoint presentation to help me with this, but in lieu of the fact we couldn't get it running. So the point I would make is I think it was a mistake to put those buoys out. Those should be removed. And in addition to that, if there is something to decide about the levels of music or something like that, then just address that, I guess. I don't see that. Yes, there is a private island, but it's not a private lake. In the presentation last month, the gentleman that put it on, he referred to the lake owners, and to me that is very telling. He's not a lake owner. He owns a piece of property on a private island, but that's the extent of his ownership of the lake. So if you live in Minneapolis, you own the lake just as much as any of you do. It's not a requirement to pay taxes or anything. That's a public body of water that anyone is free to use. If they're in a boat, they have to have registration. If they're paying their registration, they're free to use it. And it's not up to anyone to decide, we don't like you, we don't like the music you play, you're not welcome here. That's not something that should be happening, and it is. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Make sure the buoys that we're talking about, are they talking about?
I think it's
The buoys at Optimist Beach.
yeah. I think those might be
those
the
are-
swimming.
Those are the ones that the city just
city.
put up.
Yeah, City of
the
White Bear
city
Lakes
put
probably
those
you want
up.
to talk to about that. Okay, anybody
That
else?
didn't have anything to do with us.
Yep, please.
Yeah.
Good evening. I think a lot of you know me. I've spoken on behalf of a few different boards within our community. My name is Bo Montgomery, 2276 5th Street.
Thank you.
And I would say that I'm a large part of this community and hope to be for many, many years to come. One of the things that I would like to address that our group has not addressed is quote-unquote assault on the lake. And I want to address this in a form of bear boating, which is an organization that I help and I devote some time to and do some different things for. 2 years ago, there was some jet skis came out onto White Bear Lake and did some acrobatical tricks on some wakes of some different boats. And our Great Bear Boating happened to be out on the lake during that event. One of the gentlemen who helps run bear boating, Mr. Ryan, made a remark back to me after that and said, "Hey, Bo, do you know anything about what happened on the lake that night?" And I said, "I don't know a lot about it, but I know that there were some people out there, and they were kind of doing some tricks off of wakes." And he said, "Well, I just got to tell you, we were out there for bear boating, and we had these senior citizens out there, and we had a 90-plus-year-old woman who lives on the island out there who was ecstatic about the events that took place and said she had never seen anything quite like that in her life." And I want to refer back to this so-called assault on the lake in the fact that at that time, I want to, on record, there were no tickets made. Nobody was injured on Tuesday night on White Bear Lake either. And it wasn't a sanctioned event. It wasn't an event that occurred with any kind of permitting, but they weren't harming anybody. And actually, if you were an actual person on the lake, besides a select small number of individuals, you would have probably been very, very entertained. I don't jet ski. I have a pontoon on the lake and enjoy it with my family. And lastly, in remarks back to the Bowie area, again, as we all know, this is a public lake. As a matter of fact, it happens to be one of two assets, national assets, regional assets in the state of Minnesota, Lake Minnetonka and White Bear Lake. And I think we do a really good job in this community of taking care of that lake. Anytime you take and try to privatize an area on that lake by using the laws that are set in place, which has happened on Manitou Island as well, with a swimming area that came up after a few weeks ago after the event that took place here, you can see through the gray lines. It's pretty simple. My family and I are on the lake a lot and enjoy it. And limiting the access to public boaters to areas that are public is really, really wrong. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all the people that are here on both sides. We need to come together on this. We live in a beautiful community, all the communities that surround it. We live in the greatest state. And, it certainly is disheartening to see this kind of controversy going over this, especially, as we use the community, people get called out and there's issues there. So thank you for your time tonight.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for allowing that additional time.
So thank you all for coming out. That's end of our public comment period. So I'm inclined to move on to new business.
Well, I want to have a comment if I could.
Sure, thank you, Jeff.
And Bo, I agree with you. I think it's great that we can have accesses that you guys want. One of the complaints that we heard from the people, I guess, at Chateau Gay was that they couldn't get access and egress from their boat lifts out to the lake. And so that's just common courtesy that I think's been overlooked, and I think that was a big part of the complaints that I had heard anyway. Just to let you know, I think you guys on the lake is the best in the world. But I think you also got to, we've got to get our courtesy together too.
Yeah.
Can I comment on that?
No, thank you. But I appreciate that. So I'll just kind of close this down so that we can keep our meeting moving. The buoys, I believe, are the City of White Bear Lake. I would suggest that you talk to City of White Bear Lake
We have
about the
no
buoys.
control over those.
I think the suggestions that a few of you have had, that you ought to get together and talk with them, with whoever them is, I think that that's a great idea, and I would suggest that you do that. If in the future you think there's something that this board can do, please come back and visit us again. All right, so we'll move on to new business. Alan? Your new business.
As it's implied there, I'm assuming that that's the donation, right?
Yep.
Did everyone get a copy of the resolution? To be in the packet.
Packet, yeah.
Yeah, just tonight.
So the shortest tee-up for this is simply that the 501c3 that was set up, known as Respect the Lake, approached the district in the last month and essentially wants to enhance security on the lake with some more water patrol. And to that end have asked that they donate that money to the district to then turn around and put it into the county's coffers for that additional patrol. And so that's the only thing that the gift is conditioned on, is that requirement. So as the local government agency, of course, it's appropriate that we take that in, because while there's some regular patrol by both Ramsey and Washington County, this specifically is for extra patrol sort of within and underneath the contract that we have with them for the extra time that we're already paying for.
So I would like to, I'd like to generate an opportunity for discussion here. So I'm going to make a motion that we decline the check.
The gift.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a motion. We have a motion and a second to decline the check, and so I'd just like to have some discussion about that. And I'll just start. You know, my concern with us accepting the check is the precedent that it sets. And that being, you know, if Mark decides he doesn't like what Diane is doing and Mark gives us $1,500 to watch Diane's dock to give to the Sheriff's Patrol, I just worry about that. Now, I'm certainly not opposed to more hours by the Sheriff's Department on the lake. Certainly not opposed to that if that can be beneficial. But I think that if the board wants to do that, then we should consider using our own reserve funds to enhance or to up the hours that the Sheriff's Patrol spends on the lake. So that's my discussion. What do the other board members think?
I agree. I don't think it's our job to get involved unless we really see some big issues. But approving a check for $1,500 would politically put our stance as a conservation district kind of pro and favor against potentially. It puts us in a positive stance or a negative stance. And I definitely agree with you that I don't think it's the right move for the conservation district to accept the check.
Okay, others? Scott?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. But I think more broadly, I mean, we give, what, $4,500 to Ramsey County for additional patrols? And I've always wondered, you know, is that too little, too much? What benefit are we really getting out of it? If we didn't have it, how much patrol would we lose? You know, do we need to be giving them 10 times as much? A tenth as much? I really don't know what procedures that they have to avoid it being, you know, fungibly moved to some other lake where there's problems. So I have really no sense about giving money to the Water Patrol, you know, either whether it's our money or this check that I agree with you we should decline. But, you know, if it's the will of the board to give them more money, I don't know what the effect of that is. You know, could you make a dent on this, you know, so-called, illegal activity? I don't know.
Okay. Others? Jeff?
Yeah, the most flashing lights I see, I get a pretty good view of what's going on in most of the lake. It's usually speeding. You know, that's what they're getting pulled over for. I don't know that, we all got the same problem. We can all go over 35 miles an hour. A lot of people like to do it. So, but I don't think, I don't know how much of their effort is directed toward the people that are, anchoring up over by Memorial Beach, or how many, what they're spending on giving us speeding tickets. We might want to look at that too.
Anybody else?
I just don't know. So what if somebody wanted to give us money for extra milfoil?
Yes.
Would we not take it?
Take that $1,500.
Like, because this is a different subject, I mean, have we taken money in the past from associations or other societies or other groups to help out with the lake?
Yeah, homeowners.
So I don't know how different this is to me.
Susie?
I guess my thought is this letter does not specify what type of enforcement. It's not going after any particular group. It's just offering to give more money to help keep everyone safe. So I guess I'm kind of feeling like Mark does. Would we turn down money for that?
And I think it, and again, this is my perspective, is I think it sets a bad precedent. I think that if the board thinks that additional time by the Sheriff's Patrol out on the lake would be beneficial, that we have the funds in our reserve fund to cover that, and that might be a cleaner way to handle this situation. That's my perspective.
I just have one more comment, and that's we haven't even talked to either Washington or Ramsey County to see if they even have personnel.
True, and I think, and I personally, I think it would be a reasonable approach. Again, I made the motion, so you know what I'm advocating for, to decline the check and to have somebody agree to meet with the Sheriff's Patrol to find out, because I think the points Scott makes are reasonable points. That, you know, do we know exactly what we get for the money we spend with the Sheriff's Patrol? And it might be worth a discussion with the Sheriff's Patrol to figure out a way that we can better account for that time so that we're confident that the money we're spending is being well spent. And then also, to Mark's point, even if we threw more money towards the Sheriff's Department, would they have personnel that would be able to be out there at the times that would be beneficial for them to be out there?
Yeah, I'll make one more comment here, too.
Cameron?
She says respect the lake. So, I mean, I would be curious to see how the police department would enforce respecting the lake. You know, so I don't know if this is a direct correlation to what is happening over at Memorial Beach. I gotta imagine there's some influence. But respecting the lake, I mean, it's not necessarily saying Water Patrol. She puts in bold letters here, respect the lake.
That's the name of the group.
Okay.
Yeah, it's specifically for law enforcement. So Respect the Lake is the name of the organization.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion and second? Mike?
Yeah, when I first saw that, I thought, well, they're adding $1,500 to the Water Patrol for this year, not for any other time, just for this year. And I think that it seemed to me their intention was that they wanted more patrol where the pontoons are rafting together, and if they specifically put it for that, they could request or, you know, have the intention of having more patrol there, not the entire lake in those areas. And it's not something that we normally take. If it had been in the form of a grant for Water Patrol without any stipulations on time or anything added to our budget for next year, then I would think it would be more appropriate. But they're kind of channeling it towards their goal, which is, you know, I mean, that's what they're doing. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but we've got our own funds. If we want to increase Water Patrol, we can do it.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, our responsibility to have Water Patrol out there. But so if they gave it in the form of a grant and just added it to our budget for next year, then it would be over and above what we would budget. And I think we're probably, I can't say this, but I think I would vote for an increase in our patrol budget for next year. But they're kind of, I don't want to offend them by any means, but they're kind of micromanaging the money in a way with their intention that this would be for more Water Patrol, seems like in specific areas, even though they don't say that.
They don't say that.
And maybe I'm reading it wrong, but
I guess.
I think if they would say that, you know, there's just an open-end grant to our budget for Water Patrol, it would maybe you would accept that?
Alan?
And if it helps, I think donations that we've had in the past have been for specific uses like milfoil control. And this is a more general grant, obviously, or donation. And I don't read it as specific as, please patrol Optimus Beach, please patrol the private island. It doesn't say that. It didn't come with anything like that in the cover letter. And so to that end, I tried to call the Sheriff's Patrol today to see if they even have the staffing for that. Because at this point, we don't know how thin Water Patrol is in Ramsey or Washington County. I don't think I've ever seen an accounting of who's where, when, anyway. So I don't think we'd get good value if we have to pull someone off of free time and pay overtime just to get extra patrol. That money's not going to go very far when you think about the equivalent of having an officer or two out in a boat. So there might not be much bang for the bucks that they're talking about anyway. But that said, I'm perfectly happy to keep reaching out to them and find out if that would be helpful to add patrol. I'm not sure if there's that much boating season left this year anyway, but rest assured that this is not as targeted as some of you think. So there is no stipulation as far as specific areas, specific conduct, anything like that. It was very general, just laws and ordinances, just general enforcement.
Ellen, do you get a readout of what the citations are that they deliver in a year?
We end up with a report at the end of the year, and it's kind of a compendium. And so, needless to say, the vast majority of summertime stops are safety checks, things of that nature, warnings for PFDs, speeding, things like that. The very rare criminal case in BWI, things like that. I haven't seen one of those for a while. And so it might help for you to reach out and ask both patrol units to see if you can get something end of the season so that everyone knows what they're doing out there. Because, I don't think anyone on the board knows. Everyone sees the boat out there, but I haven't prosecuted anything this summer as far as any of the problems that anyone's identified. So that's not to say that they didn't go to a hearing officer and just pay a fine, but I'm just saying that it hasn't risen to the level of criminality, which is where I step in for you guys.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, the motion passes. So
I will write back to them and suggest that if they want to put it in the form of a grant towards the law enforcement budget next year, they're welcome to modify the gift. Fair?
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
And can we just build on this for a moment? And sorry to do that. Would folks be interested in meeting with or would anyone be interested in meeting with the Sheriff's Department to try to figure out if we can come to some way that's not onerous for the Sheriff's Department, but gives us a better understanding of how they're spending the dollars that we give to them? And what I'm thinking is if we could get, weekly reports or monthly or biweekly reports.
I can certainly ask the sergeant in charge of Water Patrol.
Yeah, would you
He
start
was here
that?
last week, so,
Yeah. Would you
or
start
last
that?
month, rather.
Would you start that conversation for us, Alan? Thank you. And then I think that.
In Washington.
Yeah, if we're asking one, we should ask both, for sure.
And then I think that before we enter into the agreement next year, we can at least have some information that will inform whether we want to adjust that contract or not.
Right, and it might inform who gets the extra patrol dollars. So Ramsey's got a very large plate, of course, but Washington has all of the St. Croix, which I know keeps their water patrol incredibly busy. They've got Square Lake, where there's a lot of scuba diving. So, there's just a lot going on in Washington County. So,
okay, and thank you, Alan, and thanks, everyone, for the discussion. I appreciate that. Okay, so now we're on to unfinished business. That item is buoy standards. And Scott's done quite a lot of work on this. So, Scott, will you just get this conversation started for us, please?
Yeah, sure. It has come up in previous meetings about having proper mooring buoys, and I did some research into what the rules are. This board has ordinances about requiring a permit that we would issue for a mooring buoy that's outside the ADUA, right? And that's pretty much all it says. There's nothing else. However, if you look at the state boating guide, and if you look at the state administrative rules that underlie the boating guide, not only does it specify what a mooring buoy should look like and how it should function, it also specifies that you need to get a permit from the county sheriff to put a mooring buoy anywhere on a public water in the state. Yeah, in fact, what it says here, it goes into some detail. No anchoring buoy may have a diameter of more than 24 inches, circular, or a width of more than 24 inches of some other shape. No mooring buoy or anchor buoy may be placed in the public water if it obstructs access to any public or private property or creates a navigational hazard. No mooring or anchor buoy may be placed in or upon the water of the state except by public authority or under a permit issued by the sheriff of the county. Every such buoy shall be colored white and shall be encircled by a visible blue band at least 1 inch wide. Mooring buoys must have a minimum total of 16 square inches of white reflectorization, part of which must be visible from any direction. Mooring buoys, if lighted, shall show a flashing white light. Then if you look at the Ramsey County Sheriff Department's website, they have additional rules for the permits that they issue. In fact, it's interesting that the buoy must be white in color and encircled by a 3-inch wide band, where the state only says 1 inch. So Ramsey County has added additional rules, and they've got A through K rules for the permits they would issue. There are also rules on swimming area buoys and other kind of buoys. So there's a lot out there. I could not find comparable rules on the Washington County website, but I did find a form to submit for a permit. So I guess my first question is, do we as a board have really any authority, or do we have any business issuing permits for buoys if the state gives it to the county sheriff?
So my understanding is from our ordinances, and it does say before it says or by the sheriff, it says by public authority, which we are the public authority of that lake. So anything within their ADUA, they don't need to go to the sheriff for. We're the public authority that manages that. Anything outside the ADUA, which is outside of our ordinances, we don't have ordinances for buoys outside the ADUA, so then they have to go to the sheriff and get a permit.
Well, by permit of is before sheriff. It's not before public authority.
Board, I'm pretty sure
it
that
doesn't
whenever
say
someone
public
wants...
authority. I guess we have to defer to Alan.
Yeah, Alan, can you clarify
I think
this for us?
the true mooring buoys, not swim buoys or other notification buoys, are, I think we've always referred people to the sheriff's department for permit. Pretty sure.
However, we do have an application on our website.
We do, and that's for buoys that are, I think, outside of the ADUA. Okay. And then we've got various requirements. We don't go into an A through K analysis. We talked about this, I think, last couple of meetings, and we just are very light on regulation because I think the deferment has always been to the county, to the sheriff's office. So if we wanted to put some standards like this and adopt them by reference for any buoys that this body permits, that would probably be the cleanest way to make sure that everyone's doing the same thing for the same purpose.
So, Alan, and sorry to be ignorant about this, but if somebody has a buoy in their ADUA for their sailboat, let's say, do they need to get a permit from the Ramsey County Sheriff Department or not?
I'm sure the sheriff's department would say yes.
Okay.
It's a public water, and so if someone runs into it, I think that the sheriff would want to know that it was out there legally by permit, mostly to enforce the A through K requirements, just so that you're not just putting whatever out there. I know we had a board member that I hit a whatever out there, and it wasn't a good incident, so I think that's why they're licensed by the sheriff. So that way, I mean, not every lake's going to have a conservation district, right? And so this applies to Aiken, Minnesota, right? So if you want a mooring buoy out there, you got to tell the sheriff's out there so it's legal, so they don't just pop up all over the place. So in keeping with it's a public lake, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to my concern also, though, since I was the person that had the problem, and I saw it as a potential for a dangerous situation because nobody knows where the ADUAs end, and people are going to get close to docks. And, you know, I don't want anyone else to have the problem that I did and have somebody flipping out of their boat, because it certainly has the potential to do that.
Yeah.
So my question goes to who then regulates who's got a mooring buoy out there? And does somebody go around and say, you have the correct size and you do not?
So, Alan, is
Be the sheriff.
So is it as simple as us asking the sheriff's department to enforce their rules?
Should be. I mean, we should be able to get a list. I don't think they share with the district anything that they've got permits for, do they? I've never seen that list if they do. And certainly everyone who's been on the lake knows that there are buoys out there, mooring buoys in particular. So, I mean, I can certainly ask the Water Patrol for that information too. So I think you should know. So when someone comes in and has a problem, we can say, go and talk to the sheriff about that permitted buoy, or in the alternative, complain to him because it's a non-permitted buoy and it needs regulating.
Yeah.
So
one of their rules is that the buoy area must not exceed 100 feet from shore, including the swing of the boat moored to it. Now, wouldn't that pretty much eliminate buoys outside the ADUA?
It would eliminate them inside.
It would eliminate them inside because you're talking 300 feet for ADUA.
Yeah.
200.
Probably eliminate all of them.
No, but did I understand what you said, Scott, that the buoys are not allowed outside of the 100-foot radius, or?
Right. Their
Well, you're
buoy
swinging the
area
boat.
must not exceed 100 foot from shore, including the swing of the boat moored to it.
So-
The
so-
boat
probably
has to
wouldn't.
be within 100 feet of shore.
So if our ADUA goes out 300 feet,
200 unless.
200 less 4 feet of water.
so
and then
200
out to 4
feet.
yeah, that's
Then-
really a non-issue. I mean, no one's going to swim 200 feet out to their boat, and they're not going to be swinging 50 feet on either side of a buoy. So
Yeah, but I think that my question, just to confirm, is that every buoy regulated by this ordinance, because of that 100-foot requirement, would be within the ADUA.
absolutely.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think we've ever
Within
permitted
Ramsey
one.
County. I don't know what
Oh,
it is in Washington
fair enough.
County. And see, that's the problem. What's screwy about this whole thing.
Mike?
It might be time to ask them if they want to continue enforcing that, because they haven't been enforcing it. And if they want us to enforce it,
We can
and
get
just kind of get it
delegated.
straight. Years ago, they enforced it quite heavily, and they actually put numbers on the buoys and on the, there were swim rafts and buoys, and they were putting them on all the buoys that were out there, but then mooring a boat at a buoy was quite common.
Yeah.
Then they just kind of fell out of doing that. I don't know why. And here we are today, because we've always used, with our authorized dock use area, allowed buoys inside of there, that maybe we should sit down with them or contact them and say, okay, who wants to enforce this? What makes sense? The 100 feet doesn't make sense.
And I have no problem. I mean, I
Figure it
would
out.
guess that they'd probably love to delegate
Let's
it.
just talk to them.
Yeah.
One less thing for them to do. I'm sure they would sign a joint powers agreement and allow us to do that. Because I think anyone out here who's got a complaint with a buoy is going to come here first. So it just makes sense.
I think all the two that I've ever seen on the lake are just literally for mooring. There's never a boat on it. I think there's two. There's one out in Matamita that's got he's way out there. I don't know how he gets away with it, but he's got a big pontoon out there. And there's a couple little sailboats over off 96.
Exactly. That's where I've seen them too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
there-
couldn't
and
tell you if
there's-
they're permitted.
Okay, just a moment. So, Mike?
There's also a number of mooring buoys that sailors use coming into their dock. If the wind's not right, they can't land at their dock, so you'll see the buoy out in front.
Right.
They'll sail to that and then paddle in.
Right, which is really close to shore then.
And
if
there's
it's that
a
much.
number of those.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
a lot of those.
Okay, so Alan, will you take the lead on that, and then,
The call anyway.
yep,
so.
thank you, and report back at our next meeting? Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, thanks.
One question?
Yes, please.
My one concern was the fact that buoy that I ran into was not attached appropriately, and so it wound around the motor, stopping our boat. So there has to be some attachment that can be pushed away from a boat that will keep it, do you know what I mean? To keep the buoy in place and yet movable so someone can go through the water and not have a safety issue.
Yeah, and I think that would go to the standards. So if we get the permission slip to enforce the standards, then we can adopt whatever, as long as it's consistent with state law. So that's obviously, I think we should follow the lead on the state with the size and the shape and the colors, just so that everyone knows what we're looking at.
Yeah.
But from there, we can have a discussion about what makes sense to add to the books.
Okay.
So, I think good point, though.
Okay, so good? Okay, thank you, Scott, for all of your efforts. I appreciate it. Okay, so we're on to item 8 on the agenda, report and action items. The first item is the executive committee, and the executive committee did meet, and we discussed adjusting the administrative assistant compensation. So I'm going to make a motion, and then we can have any discussion if we get a second. On behalf of the executive committee, we would like to adjust the salary from the current $23 an hour to $25.30 an hour, which is a 10% increase. We'd like to add 10 hours per year of vacation time, which would make it a total of 50 hours per year. And I think that's the extent of the motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. And thank you, Kim, for all your help.
Thank you.
So now we're on to the Lake Quality Committee. Mike?
Lake quality, the lake level is 925.05. 925.05. It stayed pretty close. It stayed above 925 all summer. It varies only an inch or two. The 3 inches of rain the other day didn't hurt because it had actually dipped below 925 for a few days. But it's 925.05. That's 1 foot 4 inches higher than last year at this time. Water temperature is 76 degrees. It was, oddly enough, it was 80 degrees before we had the almost 3 inches of rain a few days back, and it instantly went down to 76 degrees. So it's cold water coming in. That's pretty much it for my report, except that next month we will have a bid on Phragmite treatment from Lake Management. And then in October, we'll have the results of the Eurasian water milfoil treatment. Steve McComas will be here to present it, but he's already done the survey and everything, and the treatment was quite successful.
Any questions for Mike? No. Thank you, Mike. Moving on, Lake Utilization Committee, Mark?
So I'd like to make a motion. I'll explain it in a minute, but basically what this stems from is the fact that we still don't have one commercial dock, I think one, with a license in Commercial Bay. Things get pushed off until March, and we want to get rid of that. So what happens is the applications are supposed to be in by October 15th. There's a $50 late fee if you're not. Well, if you're making $24,000 or $2,400 a slip, $50 in the big grand scheme of things isn't a big deal. So I don't think anybody minds paying a late fee and throwing stuff out to us in April. So what I'd like to do is make a proposal to say that all commercial marina operators have to have their application in by October 15th. After October 15th, a fine of $25 per slip per week will be added. What we need to do is get the applications in so we can get them to the city, and the city can go and get their stuff done. So what I'd like to do is in January or February have all Commercial Bay licensed and done, and not kick the can down the road until August like we are now, and then like, who cares, season's over anyway, because that seems to be the MO down there. So I'd like to throw some teeth into it. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Yeah, Diane.
Mark, what happens if the permit's incomplete? Do they still then get the fine?
I think the only thing incomplete that they could have is their letter from the city, and we're hoping that that time will get them their letter from the city. And my thought, and I've discussed with several other people, that if the city can't, if we give them the information in November and the city can't give us the letter of approval but everything else is in order with the DNR and everybody else, that by February we approve and let the city worry about parking and bathrooms and things like that. That's my
But on
thought.
October 15th, if their application is incomplete, then do they get fined? I mean, we send it back to them?
Well, it can be incomplete in the fact that the city, we don't have to have the city's letter in,
Okay.
right? Because they need to put their application in to figure out if anything has changed, to go to the city, to get their okay for the land use ordinances, which really don't affect us that much. They do have to have, I would say that a complete application would be the application completely filled out correctly, and their permit from the DNR, water use permit from the DNR, and their payment. And that would be,
And insurance?
well, yeah,
The
completed,
basics
that's
with their
part of the
app, yeah.
completed application.
Okay.
So, yeah, which,
But they would not need the city's
Letter.
letter.
no, that's why we want it early, so we can get it to the city, so we can get the city to get the letters back to us by January or February.
Okay.
Because right now, the city hasn't even got back to us on permits that were put in April.
Right.
So,
Susie?
And we're going to notify all the commercial operators
yeah, we're
multiple
going to
times.
send them a letter this week, I hope.
Well, I was hoping that we'd do more than one letter. I know too often things get pushed aside and people don't see them.
Oh,
So
sure.
it might be an idea to do a couple of them.
Or maybe a call.
Yeah, or follow it up by a call. Well, yeah.
Do you mind just putting your mic down so that all of the people out viewing us in TV land and here
And me,
can-
yeah.
When they start getting the fines.
I can email them as well. They can get several different types so that
That would
they'll
be
catch
good.
it somewhere.
Yeah.
And hopefully that way, because we also did a fee increase this year, so I want to send them all the new fee schedule and all that, so nobody has any questions of what they.
I just don't want anyone to come, in January and be shocked and surprised that they owe an enormous amount of money.
Right.
I wonder if, and I agree with the idea. I wonder if the $25 per slip per week, if that's adequate, or if it should be more than that to incentivize them to get their permit in or their permit application in time. And I don't really have any.
Well, if you have 200 boats, a week is what, $5,000?
It's probably enough.
We'll be paying 75 a slip, and then it'll be 100 the first week, 125 the second week, 150 the third week, 175 if it's a month out.
And do we have to, and so I want to just think through how this might, the reaction. If they don't hit the October 15th deadline, then if it's one day late, is that a week late? Like if it's October 16th? So that would be considered a week late. And if they're not in 7 days after the 15th, so the 22nd, then we would be into week number 2. Okay, and Alan, do you think that passes muster? Would you have any concerns about this approach?
Yes, only because I think it could get fairly excessive. So I get that it motivates folks, but I hope you have a variance to that. People get sick, people have relations that die, all kinds of excuses can come in. I kind of like bright line rules. So if you're a day late, your permit doubles. That's what you do in most situations with like a permit when you want to improve your house. If you don't ask permission up front and get it, it's twice the cost. Just bright line, very simple. It motivates people to bring in things when they're supposed to.
So just talking through that, so the fee for the application is $75?
No, 75 per slip.
$75 per slip. And so if that doubled, then on October 16th, then it would be $150 per slip, or from that date going forward?
Whatever the check was for, you just multiply it by 2. The math is pretty simple. So, and to that end, I'd be cautious about burden shifting as well, because I thought when we passed the requirement that the city had to basically give the blessing to the permit holder or the permit person desiring the permit, it was still on them to bring in the letter to say the city's okay with your parking. And so I deem that as part of the permit application. And so there's no point in putting it on the district to get that. You know, that's up to fill-in-the-blank applicant to make sure that they've got that taken care of. That's, I think, why we passed it, so we weren't the parking police. They went and confirmed what they needed and came back with the letter from the city saying, you're good to go. So I think that that should be in place in advance when the permit application comes in. Because that way we know there's no monkeying around with, well, what if we have fewer slips? Right now we're kind of playing that Where's Waldo game with the DNR because certain people have put in requests here that are different than the water permit there. And so which one is accurate, that sort of thing. And so I think it really does go to the completeness of the permit application, if that makes sense. So Kim can basically reject it, and if someone comes traipsing in here on the day that it's due and doesn't have one of those things, there's only 4 things, right? Water permit, permit fee, insurance, and city confirmation letter. That's 4 by my count, unless I'm missing something. And those people should have 2 of those things just at their beck and call. So it shouldn't be that tough to do. And if they come in, she can just say, I can't accept it because it's not complete. You had 4 things you had to get, and you don't have them all.
And there's also the dock layout, and
That goes into the permit, too. But, yeah, I'm saying the external things that have to come in with it.
Well, is it reasonable to get a letter from the city by October 15th? Or are you saying that it should be January?
No, the city has to run it through their board. Like, it has to go to city council.
They shouldn't have to do that. It's an administrative check.
That's what I was told.
That makes no
If there's any
sense.
change.
Yeah, if there's a change,
Any
I think.
change, which there was with McGoldrick this year.
Right. Well, that's a pretty dramatic change.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So most people aren't going to have to go through that. Because I think tallies was a change, too, because maybe there was a discrepancy between what the city had and the DNR had on the water permit. So that's why I think we're all talking about this in August now, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Do with, like, say, Lake Properties, the city has not issued him one. They told him he needs to file a CUP, and that part's not done. So then, do we still just ignore and say we're not going to get involved? If they don't
My
take care
thought
of
is, I don't want to depend on the city. As long as you have your license, your DNA's water permit, and your application is filled out, that's all I care about. I don't care about your bathrooms. I don't care about your parking.
Okay.
Mike?
Well, the city, I believe, every year issues the CUP commercial use permit for each of those. So that's kind of a big deal.
The conditional use permit?
So that's what they're doing.
I don't know if they reissue those every year to the different
But I don't know
operators.
if that's because of a change or...
I think the cup in question is because there's multiple balls in the air. So you've got the marina, plus you've now got the potential of another development within that triangle on the land side. And so I think the city has tied those 2 together, which doesn't help our process at all, because all we care about, to your point, Mark, is, slips, right? We don't care about bathrooms and parking. That's why we asked the city to write the letter saying they've got enough. So that's kind of an exceptional thing, but going forward, I don't think that it'll be, as big an issue. So all we're asking them to do is confirm that they're properly there and they've got parking to accommodate the number of boats that they have in the water. So
I agree with Alan about them having the letter from the city as part of their application in order for us to consider their application package to be complete. However, I wonder if we were to pass this motion tonight, I wonder if it would be a reasonable expectation for them to get that by October 15th this year. Yes. And if we might not want to consider passing the motion as is, although I would like to offer some discussion about that as well, this year. And then it is my understanding it's an easy process for the city to issue their acceptable parking spaces letter as long as there aren't any changes.
If there's no changes, they don't even do a new letter, Sam said. They just kind of like rubber stamp it and use the same one that they had from the prior year.
Right. So it's that would be an easy thing for the applicant to have in hand by the time they bring it to the application, or by the time they submit it in future years. but maybe this year that may not be, that may be burdensome on them to get it through the city in time. So that's my comment there. The other thing is, and I'll ask you this, Mark, would you consider amending your motion along the lines of what Alan suggested, which is just a straightforward, if it's not in on time, then it doubles?
Yeah, my only point of contention is, and I don't know where we've ended up on this, is I don't care about the letter from the city. I'm not going to fine them because they don't have, I do not want to fine them because they don't have the letter from the city. Because if the city starts dragging their feet because they don't like what somebody else is doing, that shouldn't affect the marina on the lake. And there is going to be one who's going to ask for, needs a lot more parking, putting an event center in there, and the city's not going to pass that fast. And I don't want to keep that, I don't want to start fining somebody because the city couldn't get something else fast enough. Now, the DNR permit is a slam dunk. The insurance is a slam dunk. Filling out the application is a slam dunk. The only thing that they really have no control over is how fast the city moves. And so I would hate to, on October 15th, go, well, you didn't get the city to sign your letter. We're going to fine you.
And I agree with that for this year. I think future years it would be more reasonable because the docks hopefully wouldn't change, or if they were going to change, the applicant would know that when the applications are due the next year, they must have the letter from the city by October 15th.
Yeah.
Kim, could you read us back the motion? Sorry to do that to you.
The motion to have all marina applications in by 10:15 after, if they're turned in after 10:15, it would be $25 per slip per week, assessed the fine.
So that's the motion, and it doesn't reference the letter from the city being required.
So a complete application, right, I would look at as the insurance is part of the application. Well, I guess the letter from the city is now on the application, too.
Yes, it is.
So,
And I think it would just be a matter of offering a variance for this year.
Letter from the city would be the complete application, and I think the letter from the city is important. We're working with the city. They're working with us. They could use our approval. A marine owner could use our approval as leverage against the city to get a letter, or it just, I mean, I think it's in our best interest to have the city additionally qualify the marina on land for all parties concerned, including us.
I have a quick question, too.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering if October 15th is going to place a burden on the owners of the marinas, because they're still getting through this summer's activities in October 15th. Would November 15th be a more reasonable time for that?
I've filled out these same applications because it's pretty much the same one for a multi-user dock. It takes, if you've done it and it's no change from last year, it'll take maybe 5 minutes. If you have a change, it might take you 15 minutes to fill it out.
Okay, I just don't want to put an unusual burden.
As long as I can see
It's always been the
that's
15th.
been the required date. So they should be
It's
aware.
always been the 15th, but historically, the reason it was 15th was because generally the docks are still in place, and if you get an erratic application, you can just run out there and take a look and say, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense.
It doesn't.
You weren't doing that last year or something like that. So that's why it was actually set at that date, a long time ago.
I would hate to link our penalties to the performance of the city.
Yeah.
That's what I say. I like Mark's original plan.
Okay, so but that's not part of the motion, just to make sure we're clear. But I think what we're talking about is a variance to allow the letter from the city to not be part of the application, and still the application would be considered complete? Is that what we're saying?
But it is on the application. It says
Agreed.
right on the application.
Agreed.
I guess.
That can be fixed.
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
But again, I would offer, is anybody interested in allowing a variance this year to that point, that letter from the city only, but not allowing that variance in future years when, because my concern is that it's August, and in order for all of these dock owners to run their, get the letter from the city by October 15th this year, that might be onerous, but in future years, certainly that wouldn't be, because they would have a year and several months. Okay, and Alan?
A couple things. I do think you should make it a bright line rule because, again, you don't want the exceptions to take over the rule. And so the last thing you want is everyone to just throw a variance at you. And quite honestly, that really doesn't help advance your cause because now you've got all these applications out there that aren't complete, right? And so then you just conditionally approve them like we have and wait for that to come in. And then when does Kim have to trigger when it's not okay? Then it has to come back to you. And I just see many different permutations on that going horribly wrong. To that end, I think the event center marina question that the city's grappling with now is kind of a red herring. And so I don't see any reason why the applicant couldn't have just gotten something from the city saying, with respect to your docks, you're just fine. Because there's more than enough parking there. I mean, everyone on this board knows it. So I don't know if that's the city messing with the applicant or the question not being framed properly, but there's no reason why. I mean, there really isn't that many more slips out there than there was the year before. There's more than enough parking. So I think that's an applicant-city problem, but we shouldn't be trying to dovetail our policy based on that one anomaly. Because I think once this gets streamlined, it's going to be basically almost an administrative approval process here. Because everyone, once they get all of this stuff sorted out, literally everyone should be coming in. Just, I would hate to use the VFW as an example, but we've never seen someone here from there because they quietly put in their application and we quietly approve it every year. It's that easy. So it should be that easy in the triangle, going forward. But to the point of how we deal with it this year, I think it is helpful to tell people that there's a bright line and there's a fine structure. And although we're going to make these things due October 15th of this year like we always do, we can reserve the penalty imposition for permit application year 2021, right? So then we wouldn't have to worry about that fine coming into place until next October, not this October. And that way you don't have to issue variances this year for everybody, which sounds awfully dramatic. And it's a lot more paperwork.
But what if they just do the same, like, oh, okay, there's no fine, well, $50 fine, it's due the 15th of October? Well, we'll get it to you in March. Pay you $50, because that's what they do now. And then instead of starting on their problems, in January, February, we're starting on them in May and June, and they've already got their docks in.
Yeah, like it was this year.
We have them
Yeah.
all summer, we have them already operating all summer long and without permits.
So we're trying to get
And
them to
again, I
get
tell
their application in so we can look at them and get them.
Then I'd simply tell them to, hurry up and get your letters. Everyone knows what they're going to put out next year, I presume. The water's high and everyone's got what they've got. The DNR permit process is still in process. There's an argument that says that the actors right now that don't have their full water permits won't have those by October. So then we're going to be, issuing a variance because now it's not the city that's not allowing it, but it's actually the DNR?
Mike?
Possibility. Have the initial application, which is the Conservation District application, in by October 15th, and final documents by January 1st. Levy fines, however, during that time. When we did the commercial base study over a number of years, and several people doing it and all that, the final resolution was a letter from the city. And if we abandon that, we might get back right into hearing about his gas tanks standing up here. Why is his gas tank on the end of a city street? You got to do something about it. And of everything else that you wouldn't imagine today, but you'll find out later. So when we put the city on notice to give an approval to these marinas, we approved the water side. They had to approve the land side. It put these arguments in perspective. They were going to the right people. So that's why I continue to think that a letter from the city for each, and we're only talking about one marina that's not complying and 5 or 4 others that are. So, I let the tail
Two.
wag the dog as usual in the same.
Few that don't have their parking letters. Yeah.
Okay.
The big problem was Lake Properties, which Aqua used to be Sampere.
Yeah.
He hasn't had a letter from the city ever. And he said because there's no parking left for him to have, so
Yeah.
he's like, what do you want me to do?
Well, things are what they are.
Yeah, so he's never had a letter, so I don't know how I address that situation then.
Which goes back into if the city doesn't like one of the players down there,
Yeah.
because they are the big player down there, that they're involved.
Yeah.
Like, they're not just sitting there, they've got their own stuff going on down there. And when they don't like their neighbors, they can play games with them, then that affects our timeline. And I'm like, well,
I don't think
they've got, so if they say that Aqua can't have parking, then we have to tell Aqua they can't have boats. And I don't think I like the way that works as an,
Problem, right?
yeah.
Say that again, please.
The Tally's dock, and so somehow the parking got magically subsumed
Taken up
under
by
the permit
somebody.
for Tally's. That's
Right.
how that worked. And so now that the water's up, they want their own dock. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that they peeled off any of the parking for Tally's to get it. So I think that's where the city's going, where's your parking?
Right.
Because I think they have a challenge just for the restaurant, never mind the dock.
Okay, so again, we have a motion, and does everybody understand the motion? It's basically, if you don't get it in until October 15th, or before, or by October 15th, it's $25 per slip per week that would be added.
It seems without letters from the city and unable to get them as because the motion does stay a complete application.
Yeah.
That maybe this is a little unreasonable right now and we need to think about it a little harder.
Okay.
Well, we still have the motion and the second. Can we amend the motion to satisfy that? Because I think there is value in putting more teeth into our requirement to incentivize people to not create the same situation next year that they created this year. Mike?
I offered a suggestion that was have the application in, the initial application in by the 15th. Final documents to follow by January 1st.
And
Then the fines would start on January 1st.
And could we adjust that to be just the letter from the city that would be the item that would be allowed to be outstanding?
Okay.
I think they currently all have DNR permits, don't they?
I don't
Except for
think Aqua
Tally's
does.
Tally's doesn't have one that's large enough.
Yeah,
He's-
Tally's-
They have one. It's-
He has one, but-
He can work on the DNR himself, but he currently has
He
one.
has
and
one.
we have to abide by that, and it's up to him to change it.
Technically, he has one that's out of compliance.
Correct.
Well, that's the safest way to say he doesn't have a valid one now. He has one that's been issued in the past that's not in compliance currently.
What makes it out of compliance?
So the worst case is that particular dock owner would be required to reduce their number of slips to meet the permit that they have with the DNR.
The last thing from Jen was basically a restoration order was coming if they didn't get an application in that they could review. So that restoration order would take them back down to 42 or whatever that magic number was. So I'm not sure that Aqua got a water use permit.
Yeah, I do have one they got for 10.
For 10? Okay. So yeah, that means the only one that isn't current, I think, is
Is
Tally's.
Yeah, everybody else is up to date.
Everyone else has a current one. So, and when you say current documents in by the first of the year, end of the last year, do you mean everything but the written application?
Everything.
Everything. So no insurance documents needed, no letter from the city,
Oh,
nothing?
no. Well, on the 15th,
Yeah.
on October 15th, the initial application.
When you said all other documents, what does that mean, just for
Documents-
Kim's purposes?
Well, Mark is saying the documents, some of them are easy to get, but I was saying documents by the first of, additional documents, which would be insurance, DNR, and the letter from the city by the 1st of January.
Right, so that's easier for Kim to know what she's looking for.
And can I offer an alternative-friendly amendment that we, sorry, Jeff, that we limit the documents that don't need to be part of the original application to only the letter from the city?
I would prefer that, otherwise it's going to be administrative mess of who's got what pieces to me when, you know. And a lot of my guys are snowbirds, so they're gone at that time as well, so it's hard to get anything from them. And so it'd be easier to administer if we just had the one missing piece.
Okay, so now we have a pretty convoluted, actually, we still have the same motion and the same second. So
I can withdraw my second. Or amend it. We'll withdraw it and think about it.
Okay. So, Mark, do you want to adjust your motion in any way?
Wow. Yeah, I'll adjust it in any way.
Yes.
All I'm trying to do is to get them to get their this is the only thing that we need, that I think we need to do, is get their applications in right away so we can start looking at their dock layouts and looking and making sure that they've got the boats that the DNR has said that they're allowed to have, and not more and not less. And then we can start going down the road right away at the beginning of the year and say, no, you're asking for 60-something, and the DNR only says you can have 55. Or, you know, this, that, no, you're over in their ADUA. Or those kind of issues, which we get to in the middle of the year. I'd like to get to them in the beginning of the year before the docks actually go in. Because once they go in, it's really hard to be like, oh, yeah, you got to move all these docks now and tell all these boat owners that they've got to get all their boats off your docks so we can move them. You know what I mean? I would rather have that done. And again, I don't care about parking, and I don't care about toilets. I just care about the water and the boats in the water, and if we need to get that managed before we get the landside stuff managed.
So, okay, so it could be the initial application, the DNR permit, and insurance.
Everything but the
By the 15th.
Everything but the city's letter.
Why don't you withdraw and resubmit your motion?
So I withdraw my first motion. I resubmit another motion to say that by October 15th, applications have to be in complete except for the letter of compliance from the city of White Bear Lake. And if they don't have their applications in with their insurance, their DNR permit, and the application filled out correctly by October 15th, that a $25 per slip per week will begin on the 16th of October.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mike?
Do we want to say when we want to get the letter from the city?
Would you amend that for me?
I would offer a friendly amendment that we would require that the permit would not be totally complete until the letter from the city is received no later than January 31st of the following year, or January. Let's see, they would, by the 15th, they'll have a meeting, they won't have it there, then they've got a November, December meeting to do it.
January 1st?
Or end of January. Because we don't meet in December.
Be nice to have it for
Right.
the January meeting, though.
Right.
January 31st?
For our meeting,
It
no.
would be nice to have it.
First,
It'd be nice to have it for the January meeting.
Okay, January 1st.
Okay, do you accept does the motion and the second
amendment?
accept
Yeah.
friendly amendment?
Did you say January 1st? Thank you.
Okay, so again, Kim, would you read it back to us, please?
Let's see, motion that a complete application, including the insurance, the DNR, and the
Payment.
full application and payment from the marinas must be received by 10/15. It can include that, or can't think what I want to say here. The city letter, if not included, can be accepted no later than January 1st. Does that sound right? Right. Okay. If received beginning on the 16th of October, a fine will be assessed at $25 per slip per week. Does that sound right? Okay. I think I got it.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank you, everyone, for working through that. Diane.
I was wondering if that could be sent to the commercial bay owners along with the increase in their boat fees and that motion, so they.
Sure, okay.
So they know the timeline themselves.
Those letters go out this week, Kim?
Pardon?
Will those letters go out this week?
Yes.
That'd be best, I think. Okay, Mark?
Next, this should be pretty quick and easy. Derek Ski is at 2717 Lake Avenue, that's Highway 96. He has a property, and so he lives across the street from the lake on 96, but he also has a property adjoining to that is on the lake. He has 2 easement holders that are neighbors onto that property that have easement agreement from 2015. He bought the house, like he said, I think it sounds like maybe a year or 2 ago. And so they have 6 boats there with the easement holders. George and I looked at it. We didn't have any problems. We approved at the LUC, and I so move.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Any questions for Mark?
Yeah.
Mike?
The neighbor next door, Bonin, also has 6 boats.
Yeah, I've got to talk to him.
And that used to be, anyhow, he used to always come for a permit from us before, and then he sold the property. And that one requires a permit too. And now you've got his address,
Yes, we do.
name and address on this application. Okay, just thought I'd mention.
On to the Lake Education Committee. Scott?
Nothing to report this month.
Thank you. Treasurer's report. Diane?
Treasurer's report for August 2019. I'd like to make a motion to approve checks 4588 through 4593.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the checks. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes.
The next item is from the League of Minnesota Insurance Trust, and it speaks to our liability coverage. And every year we make a motion to not waive, according to our attorney's advice, to not waive the monetary limits on municipal tort liability. Say that 3 times. So I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes.
Thank you.
Any questions for Diane? Okay, thank you, Diane. Board council report. Alan?
Hello, Chair and Board. Obviously, we've had enough conversation tonight about enough other subjects, but the only thing that I'll bring up is, I guess, not to beat the DNR with a dead horse, but one of the things that I've been talking with them about is the delegation of their responsibilities under these water permits to the city, or to the district, rather. Minnetonka does that, and so makes a nice opportunity now to talk about that, whether or not we like having them sort of babysitting docks. The only thing that they really do with these water permits is essentially monitor whether or not an EAW or an EAS is triggered, depending on how much of the water surface is affected. And so I'm not sure if we really need that level of involvement with these things. So it makes a nice sort of retreat back to them, because they obviously have a top number, because they have to approve the number of slips pursuant to the water permit. And so then we can say, well, you can't have more than what the DNR says. But the DNR through this process has basically said, well, you know, we'll say whatever you say. Right, so they don't necessarily set the top number. So it's helpful for us, because it just means that if they don't have that number approved, we tell someone they can't have more than what that number is. But that's about the only practical effect that it has, other than sort of slowing our process down and forcing them the applicants rather, to go get another permit in addition to ours. So, any thoughts on that?
Mike?
You think they would reduce numbers that they've given out?
I don't think it's a question of reducing numbers. What I'm talking about is delegating the duty to issue those water permits to the district. So then we'd be the ones who would basically, we would still be responsible for administering the EAW, EAS worksheet program, basically, if someone came in and wanted more and triggered that. But quite honestly, with the bay as full as it is, I don't see that ever really happening as a practical matter. And we'd probably bring a consultant in to help us out with that if that ever did happen. Again, it would be on the applicant anyway. So where we would want the help is obviously interpreting it. I think the last time we went through that process was with Docks of White Bear back in like 2010 or something like that. And so that did trigger an EAS, just or a worksheet rather, not a full-blown study. And so we had to accept that as the result, and that meant that they didn't have to do the next step. But that whole process was driven by the DNR, not by the city, not by the district. But that's the last time that has even been implicated. And other than that, those things just sit there. Some people don't even know to get them, like Aqua, for example. So I'm not sure if it helps us that much to have that extra level of scrutiny, just because there really isn't that much scrutiny there anyway. So they don't have any metrics for what they approve. If someone walked in there tomorrow and said, hey, I want 600 boat slips, that might trigger an EAW, but they wouldn't evaluate it under any other merits whatsoever. So just a thought, and maybe something that we want to consider.
Good thought. Good thought.
So thank you for that information. And if it's okay with everybody, maybe we all take that in and we think about it and we have that as an agenda item on our next meeting's agenda.
That's good.
And I can get you kind of the mechanics of what it would take to do that, if that helps with the discussion.
Yeah, if you could be prepared to give us that next time, that'd be great, Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to start the conversation, not end it. So other than that, like I said earlier, I haven't seen anything as far as citations or anything that's driven through the court process from any of the activity on the lake. So whatever people are complaining about, it's not resulting in any tickets that I've seen, other in Washington or in Ramsey. So hopefully a lot of warnings and a lot of turn it down.
Okay. Any questions for Alan?
So thank you, Board.
Okay, thank you, Alan. We're on to item 10, adjournment. I'll move that we adjourn. Motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned. Thank you all for your time today.